The coffee had gone cold in my hands as I stared at my editor's email. Cover the Vanessa Sterling story. Find the real woman behind the myth. I was Daniel Hart, a 32-year-old investigative journalist who'd built a reputation on exposing the truth others missed. But Vanessa Sterling? She was a legend in our city, the ice queen who'd built a financial empire from nothing, crushing competitors and breaking hearts with equal efficiency. They called her the Fox Queen, a title earned through decades of ruthless business dealings. At 45, she was still stunningly beautiful, with silver-streaked auburn hair and green eyes that could freeze water. I'd seen her once at a charity gala, wrapped in a crimson dress that matched her reputation, flanked by younger admirers she ignored completely. She'd donated $500,000 that night without blinking, then left without speaking to anyone. The rumors were endless. She'd destroyed her own brother's company to acquire a patent. She'd fired employees the day before Christmas. She'd seduced investors only to bankrupt them afterward. Every story painted her as a monster in Prada heels. But something nagged at me. In 15 years of journalism, I'd learned that the most hated people often had the most interesting secrets. The town's fury toward her felt almost rehearsed, too uniform, too vicious. What were they really afraid of? I spent 3 weeks researching. Her mansion sat on 20 acres outside town, surrounded by iron gates and security cameras. She had no close friends, no family that visited, no apparent weaknesses. Her company, Sterling Ventures, had made and broken fortunes. She worked 16-hour days, ate lunch at her desk, and never took vacations. Then I found something curious buried in old property records. The estate had belonged to the Hartwell family 50 years ago. The name triggered a memory, a scandal my grandmother once mentioned about a prominent family that had vanished overnight. The connection to Vanessa wasn't immediately clear, but my instincts screamed that it mattered. I made my decision on a Thursday night. The security patterns I'd observed showed a brief window when the guards rotated positions. I wasn't proud of trespassing, but some truths couldn't be found through front doors and polite interviews. The October air bit through my jacket as I scaled the back fence near the woods. My heart hammered against my ribs. If caught, my career would be over. But if I could find the real Vanessa Sterling, understand what made her this way, it would be worth it. The mansion loomed ahead, most windows dark except for one on the second floor where warm light spilled onto the balcony. I crept closer through the manicured gardens, staying in the shadows, drawn toward that single illuminated room like a moth to flame. What I was about to witness would shatter everything I thought I knew. The climbing rose trellis held my weight as I scaled the stone wall beneath the lit balcony. My hands shook, from cold or nerves, I couldn't tell. Through the French doors, I could see movement inside what appeared to be a study. Books lined every wall, and a fire crackled in an ornate fireplace. Then I saw her. Vanessa Sterling sat in a leather chair facing the window, her back to me. Gone was the armor of her tailored suits. She wore a simple silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. But it was her posture that stopped me cold, shoulders hunched, head bowed, the very picture of defeat. She was crying, not the delicate tears of someone who cries beautifully. These were the raw, gasping sobs of someone who thought no one could hear. Her whole body shook with them. In her hands, she clutched a photograph so tightly I could see her knuckles white even from this distance. I should have left. This was too intimate, too real. But I was frozen, watching this legendary ice queen crack apart in the privacy she thought absolute. She stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace. The photograph fluttered to the floor. Through the glass, I could see it clearly now. A young couple, maybe in their 20s, radiantly happy. The woman was unmistakably a younger Vanessa, her smile so genuine it transformed her face. The man beside her had kind eyes and an arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the photo, her voice barely audible. "God, James, I'm so sorry. I tried to protect it. I tried to save what we built." She retrieved a wooden box from a desk drawer. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age. She pulled one out with trembling fingers and read aloud. "My darling Vanessa, the investors are circling, but I won't let them take Sterling Industries from us. Our fathers built this together. We'll build it even greater. All my love, James." The pieces began clicking together in my mind. James Hartwell. This was the Hartwell estate. Sterling had been her married name. She sank back into the chair, pressing the letter to her lips. You believed in them. You trusted your own brother, and it killed you. They staged that car accident so perfectly. Everyone believed it was drunk driving, even though you never drank. And I couldn't prove it. I couldn't make them pay the right way. Her voice turned hard, bitter. So I paid them back the only way left. Took everything from everyone who took you from me. Built your dream bigger than they could ever imagine. Kept it all from their greedy hands. Made them fear me so they'd never try again. I felt like an intruder on something sacred and terrible. This wasn't just grief. It was a glimpse into a decades-long vendetta born from unbearable loss. Vanessa stood again, moving to a side table where a bottle of whiskey sat next to a single glass. She poured 2 fingers worth, staring at the amber liquid. For a moment, I thought she might drink it. Instead, she hurled the glass into the fireplace. It shattered with a sound like breaking bones. 23 years, she said to the empty room. 23 years of being strong enough for both of us. Strong enough that they'll never take anything from anyone I protect again. Even if they hate me for it. Even if I die alone and everyone celebrates. I must have made a sound. A gasp, a shifted weight. Because Vanessa's head snapped toward the balcony doors. Our eyes locked through the glass. For 3 heartbeats, neither of us moved. Her tear-stained face registered shock, then something harder. I braced for her to scream for security, to call the police. Instead, she walked to the doors and opened them. The October wind rushed in, carrying the scent of her perfume, something subtle, expensive, and sad. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the exhaustion carved into her features. She was even more beautiful than from a distance, but it was a terrible beauty, like a battlefield at sunset. "Daniel Hart," she said, her voice steady despite the tears still wet on her cheeks. "The journalist who thinks he can expose me. Well, you've certainly found something to expose, haven't you?" I opened my mouth, closed it. No excuse seemed adequate for what I'd done. She stepped aside. "Come in. If you're going to spy on me, you might as well be comfortable." The study was warmer than the night air, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls of books. I noticed the titles as I entered: philosophy, history, poetry. Not what I expected from a ruthless businesswoman. "I should explain," I started. "You should leave," she interrupted, but there was no venom in it. She poured another whiskey, this time managing to drink it. "But you won't. Journalists never do until they have their story." She settled into her chair, gesturing for me to sit across from her. I did, perching on the edge of a matching leather seat that probably cost more than my car. "My husband James was murdered 23 years ago," she said without preamble. "His brother Richard and a consortium of investors wanted Sterling Industries. James refused to sell. 3 days later, his brakes mysteriously failed on a mountain road." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "The police called it an accident. Blamed his blood alcohol level. Except James was allergic to alcohol. But Richard had friends in the department. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. So you took revenge," I said quietly. "I took everything they valued more than human life. Their money, their power, their pride." Her green eyes met mine, defiant. "I became what they accused me of being. Better to be feared than destroyed." She pulled out another letter, this one more recent, and handed it to me. I read words from someone named Patricia, thanking Vanessa for the anonymous scholarship that had saved her daughter's education after her husband was fired. Another from Marcus, grateful for the loan that kept his business afloat when banks refused him. "You help people," I breathed. "I protect people who can't protect themselves," she corrected. Quietly, secretly, because if the vultures knew I had a heart, they'd aim for it. My reputation keeps them focused on fearing me instead of hurting others. She stood, moving to the window where I'd first seen her. "Everyone in this town who calls me Heartless is safe because of it. The employees I fired before Christmas? I paid their salaries for 6 months while they found better jobs away from a company about to collapse. My brother's business? He was embezzling from worker pensions. I stopped him before thousands lost their retirement. Why not tell people the truth? Because then it stops working." She turned to me, and in the firelight, she looked both ancient and young. "Fear is armor. Let them hate me. Let them think I'm a monster. As long as they're too afraid to become monsters themselves, I've done my job." I thought of all my research, all the stories. "The investor you allegedly seduced and bankrupted?" A sad smile crossed her face. "Gregory Mansion. He was blackmailing a young employee, threatening her career if she didn't sleep with him. I gathered evidence, then ruined him publicly. She got to keep her dignity and her job. I got another terrible story added to my legend. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire. I was supposed to be the one uncovering truth, but Vanessa Sterling had just handed me more truth than I knew how to carry. Why tell me this? I asked, my voice rougher than intended. I could publish everything. Vanessa moved closer until I could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. You could, she agreed. But you won't. Because you're not the kind of journalist who destroys people's carefully constructed defenses just for a headline. You don't know what kind of journalist I am. Don't I? She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my chest tight. You spent 3 weeks researching before breaking into my home. Most would have fabricated their story from rumors. You climbed that wall looking for truth, not ammunition. She was right, and I hated that she could read me so easily. Someone needs to know who you really are. Why? The question came out almost pleading. So they can expect me to be soft? So the next Richard Sterling thinks he can take what isn't his, because poor Vanessa is too grief-stricken to fight back. I stood, closing the distance between us. Because you shouldn't have to carry this alone. 23 years of pretending to be heartless when you're the most feeling person in this entire city. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't romanticize this. I've done terrible things, made ruthless choices. To protect people, I interrupted. There's a difference between cruelty and calculated protection. Is there? She laughed bitterly. Tell that to the people whose companies I've dismantled, whose careers I've ended. The fact that they deserved it doesn't erase the damage. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. My hand touched her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped. Her skin was soft, warm, so at odds with her Ice Queen reputation. Daniel, she whispered, and my name on her lips sent heat through my veins. This is dangerous. You're dangerous. Why? I moved closer until I could feel her breath on my face. Because you see me. Her hands came up to my chest, and I couldn't tell if she was pushing me away or pulling me closer. Everyone else sees the Fox Queen, the heartless bitch, the woman to fear. But you see Vanessa, and that terrifies me more than anything. The space between us evaporated. Our lips met in a kiss that was desperate, hungry, full of years of her loneliness and my searching for something real. Her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. I wrapped an arm around her waist, feeling her body mold against mine. She tasted like whiskey and tears and secrets. The kiss deepened, became almost frantic. We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, hearts racing in sync. This is insane, she breathed. You broke into my house. I should call the police. But you won't, I said, echoing her earlier words. Her laugh was shaky, real. No, I won't. She pulled back slightly, her hand still resting on my chest. But if you write this story, if you expose what I've told you, I'll destroy you. Professionally, financially, completely. I need you to understand that. I understand. I caught her hands in mine. But I'm not writing that story. Not the way you think. Then what story are you writing? I looked into her eyes, seeing past the fear and exhaustion to something else. Hope, fragile and terrifying. I don't know yet. But it won't be the one that destroys what you've built. What James died for. She kissed me again, softer this time, grateful and uncertain. When we finally broke apart, she led me to sit by the fire, our hands still entwined. We talked until dawn painted the sky pink and gold. Vanessa told me everything about James, their dreams, the conspiracy that killed him, every careful move she'd made in the years since. I listened, asked questions, and slowly understood the magnitude of what she'd sacrificed. There's someone you should meet, she said as morning light filled the study. She made a phone call, speaking in quiet tones. An hour later, a woman in her 60s arrived, Patricia, whose letter I'd read. Then Marcus, the business owner Vanessa had saved. Over the next days, I met a dozen more. People whose lives she'd quietly protected, whose secrets she'd kept, whose burdens she'd shouldered without acknowledgement. But I also met those she'd destroyed. Richard Sterling, now living modestly after his embezzlement was exposed. He still insisted Vanessa was a monster. She took everything from me. He spat. You tried to take everything from everyone else. I replied coldly. She just stopped you. My story came together differently than anyone expected. I titled it The Guardian in the Shadows and published it 3 weeks later. I didn't expose Vanessa's secret protection network or explain every action. Instead, I wrote about the complexity of justice, about how sometimes the strongest people carry the heaviest burdens, about the cost of being the one willing to be hated so others can be safe. The reaction was mixed. Some still called Vanessa heartless. Others began questioning the narratives they'd accepted. A few of the people she'd secretly helped came forward, adding their voices to the conversation. Vanessa called me the night it published. "You could have destroyed me or canonized me," she said. "Instead, you just made people think." "That's rare. Will you let me take you to dinner?" I asked, publicly, where everyone can see that someone sees you as more than the Fox Queen. There was a long pause. That would change everything. Maybe it's time things changed. Our first public appearance together caused whispers throughout the city. But Vanessa held her head high, her hand in mine, daring anyone to comment. We became something unexpected, the journalist and the ice queen, the truth seeker and the guardian of secrets. I learned that intimacy with Vanessa meant understanding her complexity, the fierce protector and the grieving widow, the ruthless businesswoman and the woman who cried alone in the dark. When we were alone, she let the armor fall away. In my arms, she was simply Vanessa, no longer hiding the softness beneath the steel. Months passed. Her reputation slowly shifted, not to beloved philanthropist, but to something more nuanced. People began to understand that the world needed those willing to be the villain in someone else's story to protect the vulnerable. One evening, as we sat in her study, our study now, she pulled out the old photograph of James. "I think he'd approve of you," she said softly. "He always said the truth mattered more than comfort." "Do you still feel guilty?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Every day." She smiled sadly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe the guilt keeps me honest, keeps me from becoming the monster they always accused me of being." I pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You were never the monster, Vanessa. You were just the only one strong enough to wear the mask." She turned in my arms, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "You changed everything, you know. That night you climbed my wall looking for truth. You found it, but you also gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope. The hope that someone could see all of me, the good, the bad, the necessary evils, and not turn away." She kissed me deeply, her hands cupping my face. "Thank you for seeing me, Daniel Hart. Thank you for not running away when you learned the truth." "Never," I promised against her lips. Some truths are worth protecting, and some people are worth standing beside, no matter how the world sees them. Outside, the city that had feared her for so long continued its life. But here, in this room where I'd once seen her break, we'd built something real from the ruins of her reputation and my curiosity. She was still called Heartless by some, but I knew the truth. Her heart was too big, felt too much, loved too fiercely. She'd simply learned to hide it behind ice and steal to survive. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure she never had to hide it from me.